My name is Thomas. The moment someone repeatedly threatens divorce as a weapon, they're teaching you exactly what you need to do, even if it takes years to listen finally. Before we get started, like the video and comment where you're watching from below. I'd been married to Chloe for 15 years when I finally said okay to her divorce threat and walked out of a marriage I'd been desperately trying to save for far too long. 15 years of tolerating disrespect, absorbing her anger, and staying for our daughter while slowly losing myself in the process. We met when we were both in our 20s, young professionals starting our careers in Denver. I was a civil engineer at a construction firm, and she was a bank officer at a regional bank. We'd met at a mutual friend's birthday party, started talking about career ambitions, plans, and discovered we had compatible goals. The relationship progressed naturally. Dated for 2 years before getting engaged and married in a modest ceremony with family and friends. We were focused on building financial stability rather than impressing anyone with a lavish wedding. The first few years of marriage were decent. We bought a small house together, both advanced in our careers, and worked as a team toward shared goals. Had our daughter Diana when we'd been married about 3 years. She became the center of our world immediately. We weren't perfect. Chloe had always had a temper, quick to anger, slow to let things go. She would get frustrated easily when things didn't go her way. But in the early years, those flashes of anger were manageable. We'd argue, cool down, move forward. As the years progressed, though, something in Chloe hardened. The quick temper became constant irritability. The occasional complaints became relentless criticism. The warmth between us cooled until there was barely any emotional connection left. And she developed a pattern that became the defining feature of our marriage. Threatening divorce whenever we had a disagreement. It started around year 7 or 8. We'd argue about something, and when I try to explain something I find uncomfortable, she'd escalate immediately. She said we should just get divorced if I wasn't happy. Perhaps we weren't meant to be together, and we'd be better off apart. The first few times she said it, the words devastated and disarmed me, leaving me unable to complain any further. It felt like the foundation of our marriage was cracking. I'd immediately try to de-escalate, would tell her we shouldn't say things we'd regret, and would work to smooth over whatever conflict had sparked the threat. She'd calm down eventually. We'd move past it. Life would continue. But the pattern repeated. Every argument, every disagreement, every time I expressed dissatisfaction with something, she'd threaten divorce. Since she figured this was my weakness, it became her go-to weapon. The thing she'd deploy to end conversations she didn't want to have. The nuclear option she'd use to shut me down whenever I tried to address problems in our marriage. And I kept absorbing it, trying to maintain peace, and kept prioritizing keeping our family intact over addressing how dysfunctional our relationship had become. Part of my determination to stay came from my own childhood. My parents had fought constantly when I was growing up. They had bitter arguments filled with resentment and blame. They divorced when I was 7. Thinking it would solve everything. It hadn't. The divorce had just replaced one kind of misery with another. I'd been shuttled between 2 households, caught in the middle of their ongoing hostility. My mother had started dating someone new within months, a man who resented having her kid around. I'd endured years of subtle and not so subtle mistreatment from him, while my mother looked the other way. That experience had marked me deeply. Made me believe that staying in an unhappy marriage was better than putting a child through divorce. That I could endure whatever dysfunction existed between Chloe and me if it meant Diana grew up in an intact home. So I stayed, tolerated the emotional coldness, absorbed the constant criticism, and swallowed the divorce threats over and over while trying to be the parent our daughter deserved. But Chloe changed even more dramatically around year 11 of our marriage. She started staying out late frequently without any reasonable reason. She would come home late, sometimes after Diana was already asleep. Her behavior felt like she had emotionally checked out thoroughly from our marriage. Conversations became purely transactional, focusing on household logistics, nothing deeper. Her tone when speaking to me was consistently impatient. I tried to bridge the widening gap between us. Suggested date nights, She'd agree, reluctantly, then be on her phone the entire time. Bought her small gifts for no reason. She'd accept them with perfunctory thanks that held no warmth. At this point, I tried to engage her in conversations about our relationship. She'd shut down immediately. Our marriage became purely mechanical. We were co-parents occupying the same house, not companions or partners, roommates with a shared child and a shared mortgage. I told myself, Diana was worth the emptiness I felt, that she had two parents under one roof, that she was happy and thriving, that my sacrifice of personal happiness was justified by her stability. But the situation kept deteriorating. One Friday evening, about 4 years into this pattern of Chloe's late nights and emotional absence, she announced casually that she had a team hangout after work. Said she'd be home late. Later turned into midnight, then 1 in the morning, then 2. I tried calling, no answer. Sent text messages. They showed delivered, but were never read. I stayed awake the entire night. Sitting in the living room, partially worried about her safety, partially angry at the disrespect of not even sending a courtesy text to let me know she'd be out all night. Around 7 in the morning, I heard her car in the driveway. She walked in quietly, clearly hoping to slip in unnoticed. I was sitting on the couch. She startled slightly when she saw me. I asked her as gently as I could manage why she couldn't at least text to let me know she'd be out all night. Pointed out that I'd been awake, worried, that common courtesy required communication. Chloe sighed heavily, like I were being unreasonable. Told me she was an adult who didn't need to seek permission about where she went or when she came home. That word, permission, stung in a way she probably intended. She was framing my request for basic consideration as controlling behavior, making me the problem for expecting respect. I didn't shout or argue further. I just walked away. Over the following weeks, I withdrew emotionally. Stopped trying to engage Chloe in conversation beyond necessities. Stopped attempting affection or connection. Just focused on our daughter, Diana, and my work. Chloe acted like nothing was wrong. She would be pleasant around our daughter, Diana, smiling and engaging with her. But when it was just the two of us, the coldness remained. The silent treatment I gave her didn't seem to concern her at all. One evening, about a month after that all-night absence, Diana approached me quietly while I was in my home office. She was 11 then, perceptive enough to sense the tension even though we tried hiding it. She asked me if her mom and I were fighting. I forced a smile and told her no, we weren't fighting. She looked unconvinced but didn't press further. Just hugged me and went back to her room. That moment broke something in me. The realization that Diana was being affected by the dysfunction that Chloe and I were maintaining. That staying together for her sake might actually be harming her more than helping. But I still didn't leave. Still told myself that an intact home, however dysfunctional, was better than divorce. About a month later, Chloe repeated the same pattern. Friday night, she claimed she was going out with colleagues and disappeared until the next morning. This time I didn't text or call. Just waited. She walked in around 8 on Saturday morning. I'd been awake for hours, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee. I told her calmly that this pattern couldn't continue. That disappearing overnight without communication wasn't acceptable. That she was married, not single, and marriage required basic respect and consideration. Chloe stopped mid-step into the kitchen. Her expression shifted from defensive to angry in seconds. Asked me if I was trying to control her movements now. Whether I thought I could dictate where she went and when she returned. I stayed calm. Told her I wasn't asking for control. I was asking for respect. For the basic courtesy of communication that any partner deserved. Her voice rose. Said that if things had gotten to this point, maybe we shouldn't be married anymore. Maybe it was time for a divorce. I looked at her for a long moment. This woman I'd been married to for 15 years. Who I'd built a life with. Who'd given me a daughter. Who'd just threatened divorce for probably the 100th time over the course of our marriage. And I felt nothing. No fear of losing her. No panic about the marriage ending. Just exhausted acceptance. I said simply and quietly, "Okay." Chloe's expression shifted to surprise. She'd expected me to do what I always did, back down, try to smooth things over, plead with her not to say things like that. Instead, I'd agreed. Had called what she'd assumed was a bluff. She scoffed. Probably thought I was the one bluffing now. Turned and stormed out of the kitchen, went to our bedroom, and slammed the door. I sat at the kitchen table for another hour. Felt this strange calm, like a decision that had been pending for years had finally been made. That evening, while Chloe was in the shower and Diana was at a friend's house for a sleepover, I packed a bag. Just clothes and essential toiletries. My laptop and work materials. Got in my car and drove to my parents' house across town. They still lived in the same house I'd grown up in, about 30 minutes away. I showed up at their door around 8 in the evening. My mother answered, looking surprised to see me with a duffel bag. I told them I'd left Chloe and that the marriage was over. I needed a place to stay for a while. My parents didn't pry. My mother said quietly that she'd always known I was trying too hard to hold things together. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Maybe years. The absence of tension, of waiting for the next argument or the next divorce threat, felt liberating. The next day, I didn't call or text Chloe. Didn't explain where I was or when I'd be back. I let her experience the same lack of communication she'd given me repeatedly. By evening, she texted me, asking where I was, whether I was seriously going to act childish about this. I didn't respond. She called multiple times. I let them go to voicemail. The silence clearly unnerved her. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't scrambling to fix things, reassure her, or de-escalate the situation. Days passed. I stayed at my parents' house, went to work, and maintained my normal routines. Just didn't go home. Chloe's text shifted from annoyed to confused to concerned. She wasn't used to me actually following through when she threatened consequences. A week after I'd left, I consulted with a female divorce attorney recommended by a colleague who'd gone through his own divorce. I met up with this attorney and explained the situation. She asked if I was sure about the divorce. I told her I was completely sure that I'd spent years trying to save a marriage that only I wanted to save. That I was done. She prepared the paperwork. I reviewed and signed everything. She filed with the court. About 10 days after I'd left our house, a courier delivered the divorce papers to Chloe. She called me immediately after receiving them. I answered this time. She was in shock, demanded to know if I was serious, whether I'd really filed for divorce. I told her calmly that I was entirely serious, that she'd threatened divorce hundreds of times over the years, that I'd finally taken her at her word. She started backtracking, said she'd never meant it, that it was just something she said when she was angry, that I knew she didn't actually want a divorce. I told her that whether she meant it or not, I did. I was done living in a marriage where I was disrespected constantly, where basic communication didn't exist, and I was threatened with divorce every time I expressed any dissatisfaction. She tried arguing, tried guilt-tripping me about Diana, said I was abandoning our family. I pointed out that she'd been emotionally absent from our family for years, that she stayed out all night without communication, that she checked out of our marriage long before I'd finally left. The call ended with nothing resolved. Just the reality that divorce was happening whether she wanted it or not. The divorce process was brutal. Chloe fought me on everything. Demanded primary custody of Diana despite having been the emotionally absent parent. Wanted an enormous settlement despite us having relatively equal incomes. Her attorney tried to paint me as controlling and abandoning, as someone who'd left his family over a minor argument. My attorney countered with evidence of Chloe's pattern of emotional abuse. The constant divorce threats over 15 years. Her unexplained overnight absences. Her refusal to communicate basic information about her whereabouts. We had to bring Diana into it to some degree, not by making her testify, but by having a guardian ad litem interview her about her relationship with each parent and where she felt most stable. The whole process took about 18 months. Court dates, mediation sessions, and financial discovery. The grinding machinery of legal dissolution. Eventually, we settled. Joint custody with a schedule that split Diana's time relatively evenly. Asset division that gave us each about half of what we'd accumulated. No spousal support since we earned similar amounts. The divorce was finalized when I was 42. 15 years of marriage ended with a judge's signature on legal documents. I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment near my work. Close enough to Diana's school that I could easily handle pickups and drop-offs during my custody time. I started rebuilding my life as a single father with joint custody. Developed routines for my time with Diana. Made my apartment feel like her home, too. Diana adjusted better than I'd feared. She'd known something was wrong between Chloe and me even when we tried hiding it. The divorce at least ended the tension she'd been living with. About 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I went to pick up Diana from Chloe's house for my custody weekend. Chloe answered the door. We'd barely spoken beyond logistics since the divorce. All communication had been through text. But that evening, as Diana ran to get her overnight bag, Chloe looked at me and said softly that I'd really meant it. The divorce and leaving. All of it. I nodded. Told her simply that I'd stopped fighting for someone who kept daring me to walk away. That after years of divorce threats, I'd finally taken her seriously. She looked like she wanted to say more, but Diana came back. I took our daughter's bag and left. That was the last substantial conversation we had. Since then, it's been purely functional co-parenting communication. Pick-up times, school events, and medical appointments. Nothing personal. Diana is 14 now. Doing well despite having divorced parents. Maintains good relationships with both of us. I appreciate the lack of tension compared to those final years before the divorce. I've been reflecting a lot on everything that happened. During the years I stayed, I was trying to hold a marriage together that was already broken. I believe staying because of Diana was the loving choice when it was actually teaching her that tolerating disrespect was normal. I used to think staying for the child was love, but I learned that peace is also love. Modeling healthy boundaries and self-respect teaches your child that relationships should never be one-sided. That showing a child that it's okay to walk away from situations where you're consistently disrespected is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. I don't regret the years I tried to make the marriage work. Don't regret giving it every chance before finally leaving. Those efforts meant I knew with certainty that I'd done everything possible before walking away. But I also don't regret leaving. Don't regret finally taking Chloe at her word when she threatened divorce for probably the 1,000th time. The marriage had been over long before I actually left. I'd just been the only one still trying to save it. Looking back now, 3 years since I said okay and walked out, I understand several things clearly. I learned that threatening divorce is emotional abuse. Using the dissolution of your marriage as a weapon to control conversations, to shut down conflict, to avoid accountability, that's manipulation. And I tolerated it for far too long. I learned that staying for the kids isn't always the right choice. Children are perceptive and can sense dysfunction even when you try to hide it. Diana was better off with 2 separate, peaceful homes than one shared, tense home. I learned that you can't save a marriage alone. That all my efforts to bridge the gap, to maintain connection, to preserve our family, none of it mattered because Chloe had checked out years before I finally left. I learned that someone's repeated words reveal their true desires. Chloe threatened divorce constantly. On some level, she'd wanted out for years, but was too comfortable with our shared life actually to initiate the end. So she'd pushed and pushed, expecting me to either fix everything or leave, never imagining I'd actually call her bluff. Most importantly, I learned that self-respect requires action, that I couldn't preserve both my dignity and a marriage where I was constantly disrespected, that choosing peace for myself and stability for Diana meant finally walking away from someone who'd been daring me to leave for years. When people think I gave up too easily, saying 15 years of marriage deserved more fighting, more attempts at counseling, more effort before ending things. But those people didn't live in my marriage, didn't absorb the constant divorce threats, didn't experience years of emotional coldness and overnight absences without communication, didn't try repeatedly to bridge gaps that only widened. I fought for that marriage for over a decade. Tolerated disrespect, absorbed threats, prioritized keeping the family intact over my own well-being. The only thing I gave up on was trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. Chloe still plays the role of a victim in her narrative. I've heard through mutual friends that she tells people I abandoned the family over a small argument, that I gave up without trying. I don't correct her story publicly. Don't feel the need to defend myself to people who weren't there. The people who matter know the truth. I wish Chloe well genuinely. Hope she's building a life that makes her happy. Hope she's learned from our failed marriage. But I don't miss being married to her. Don't miss the constant tension. Don't miss walking on eggshells, waiting for the next divorce threat. Don't miss feeling alone while technically being in a relationship. I miss the idea of what our marriage could have been. The partnership we were building in those early years. The family unit I wanted Diana to grow up in. But I don't miss the reality of what our marriage actually was in those final years. The coldness, the disrespect, the emotional abandonment. I'm building a life now that feels authentic, peaceful, based on honest relationships with people who value me. It's not the life I imagined at 28 when I married Chloe. Not the intact family raising a child together that I'd planned for. But it's better than the life I was living in those final years of marriage. Better than slowly eroding under constant criticism and threats. Chloe and I will probably have minimal contact once our daughter, Diana, is an adult. There is no reason to maintain a connection beyond our shared daughter. We'll both move forward with separate lives. Different than what we'd planned, but better than what we'd have had if I'd stayed. Because I finally learned that peace matters. That self-respect isn't optional. You can't build a life with someone who uses their dissolution as a weapon. Chloe taught me that lesson by threatening to divorce me for 15 years. I finally learned it by saying okay and walking away. Best decision I ever made. Even though it took me far too long to make it. Because now I understand. Staying in dysfunction isn't love. Walking away from it is. And I'll never forget that lesson again.